Hello and welcome to this, our 47th live stream. Today is Passover. It's also the Sabbath. So, a Shabbat Shalom Pesach. And for if you are a member of, say, Western Christianity, this is also Good Friday. So this is one of those rare times when we have actually multiple traditions celebrating a holy day all at the same time. So this is actually really unusual that we have both a Passover on a Sabbath on a Good Friday. So it's very unusual. It doesn't happen very often. If you're a part of the Eastern Orthodox tradition, well, you got to wait till next week for Good Friday. But most of Christianity, for example, in North America, will be celebrating Good Friday today. So, again, what we do is we've come to answer your questions on ancient Egypt and the Bible. Same format as always, where we basically super chats get priority, but we also want to take non-super chats. So for that, if it's a question directed to me, please put a Q and a colon in front of your question. And we all ask that you only ask your question once during the live chat. And if it's a question about a passage in the Bible or a foreign word, please specify what the passage that word comes from, or that passage you're referring to, or what you think the word means. So, with that said, let's get into it. So we are going to take a few non-super chats to begin with, and then we'll get into the super chats. And wow, this is going to be. I think this is going to be great. By the way, I have my setter on the stove. It's sort of cooking up here, so I'm not really. I don't really do a traditional setter. Like a traditional setter will use chicken or brisket. I think the command to do lamb is temple period, so I go with the lamb. But that's me, and I know most Jewish people don't do it that way. So anyway, yes, I'm after I get done on the live stream here, I'm going to be having my Seder dinner. So let's get into it. Okay, so our first non-super chat here comes from Matthew Chanel. What is the numerical meaning of the mark of the beast 666? My assumption is the false perfection masquerading perfection. 6, a number of imperfection repeated 3 times. Okay. Now, there are actually many views on this. The most popular view right now is that this is Gematria. And basically, the idea that it's the name of Nero Caesar. Okay? Nero Kaiser. And if you convert the letters of Nero Kaiser into basically Aramaic letters and then add them all up, you get 666. That is by far the most popular view right now in New Testament scholarship. But it's not the only view. It's not the only view. There are other views of this. There's a view out there that basically says that 6 is the number of man, and it is a exaltation of man. You know, the triplicate 6 being an elevation of mankind. Now, the only problem with this is that because because the text itself is not using Arabic numbers, it's not really showing up in the text as 666, but as Greek letters, which do numbers a little differently. Okay. But I think there's a third, even a less well known view on this, that it is basically it's both a an allusion to Nero, but also has a Old Testament archetype in Solomon. Basically, the idea of someone who gains wealth really, really fast. There's a passage in the Book of Kings that talks about, in his first year of his reign, Solomon acquired 666 talents of gold. Okay, which is a phenomenal amount of wealth. Phenomenal amount of wealth. So it could be a basically an allusion to Solomon, meaning somebody who basically rose up out of nothing. Was maybe a minor figure, but he acquired wealth quickly, acquired power quickly, and was able to control other nations through his abilities. I tend to lean towards that third view. That, yes, it may be an allusion to Nero, but it's also an allusion to Solomon as well. So that's sort of where I stand on this. But most scholars will say it's an allusion to Nero. That it's Gamatria. And that's more, I think some of that comes out of the fact that they don't actually have an alternate view from the Old Testament. But I think there is an alternate view from the Old Testament that I think allows the number 666 to stand as a piece of Old Testament symbolism. Okay? So I hope that answers your question. It's a good question. Thank you very much for the question. It's very interesting. Okay. Our second question, non-super chat, comes from the Siren. And he asks, is there any linguistic reason to think that monotheistic passages such as Isaiah, ancient Near Eastern hyperbole, like that found in Sinaway, especially in light of Isaiah 47:8 and Zephaniah 2:15? Okay. The only problem with considering it as hyperbole is that you get that much hyperbole running essentially from Isaiah 44 all the way through to Isaiah 48. I mean, it's an incredible amount of over and over and over again where God says, I am the first, I am the last, besides me there is no God. Or, I am the first, I am the last, I know of no other God beside me. You get this over and over and over again in Isaiah. So I don't think Isaiah is going to the extent of this being, say, monolatry that's using hyperbole when it really means either a polytheism or a henotheism. I think Isaiah is very, very clear that what he's trying to communicate is monotheism. Okay, and it does fit in with the period too, where you do have Israelite prophets trying to press for full monotheism and full, not even tolerating other forms of, say, divine worship. So I wouldn't say. In the case of Sinaway, that's really old. You're talking Middle Bronze period there. This is long before the Israelites even left Egypt. So, like in the case of Sinaway here, you're talking Middle Kingdom, 12th dynasty, 11th, 12th dynasty, and it's it's a different era. It's a different period. That sort of ancient Near Eastern hyperbole was very, very common in, say, Middle Bronze Age, even into the Late Bronze Age. But it's not so common anymore in the Iron Age. Even in Egypt, it becomes less common in Egypt. So we even almost have to take the hyperbole within its historical context, because even in Egypt, where you start getting sort of more, say, I wouldn't say monotheistic, but definitely monolatrous strains of even, say, their polytheistic cults. And in those monolatrous strains, like, for example, the cult of Amun-Re at Karnak, especially after and during and after the Third Intermediate Period, you are starting to see, say, less diversity in polytheism and more monolatry. So even then, the hyperbole almost becomes a sort of self-fulfilling in that respect. So, as I said, even in Egypt, we start seeing that sort of shift a bit. But definitely in Iron Age Israel, Iron Age 2 Israel, that's you're talking about monotheism, not just ancient Near Eastern hyperbole. Okay? So I hope that answers your question. Great question. Thank you very much for the question. Okay, and our third non-super chat comes from the Third Man Podcast. And he asks, what position do you take on henotheism, monotheism, monolatry, etc.? What are some biblical reasons you lean the way that you do? Okay, well, it really depends. Okay? To your first question, whether or not we're talking about henotheism, monotheism, and monolatry, they aren't, say, exclusive categories. Now, monotheism is very exclusive. You're not going to have an overlap of monotheism and henotheism, but you are going to have an overlap of monolatry and henotheism, and monolatry and monotheism. Those are not mutually exclusive concepts. You can even have pantheism and monolatry and pantheism mixed with henotheism as well. There's these we have to understand that these concepts come out of the 19th century, and they are meant to sort of help us to categorize various world religions and how they view, say, the whole idea of God. But sometimes ancient peoples weren't quite so precise on their definitions. Even something as sort of say more exclusive, like monotheism, can have more than one view attached to it. Like you do have the monolithic monotheism versus the monarchical monotheists. And, that's a very, very different way of, say, viewing the spirit world. But, even there's some overlap between them. We would say consider Allah from Islam to be a monolithic monotheism, but say Yahweh from Christianity and Judaism would be more of a monarchical monotheism. So even say between the Abrahamic faiths, there is some difference here between which particular faith is viewing God in which particular way. So the way I lean, as far as, say, what we find in the Bible, I think it tends to be it is a monolatry. I think it is a monolatry based upon monarchical monotheism. I don't quite buy that that the texts that are used to, say, support polytheism in the Torah are you do get a lot of, say, wiggle room in those texts. It's basically you're taking an unclear text and you're trying to interpret the rest of the Bible by an unclear text. Where, say, a more clear text, for example, like the what follows after the Ten Commandments, where they're told to serve one God only. Well, okay, there's your monolatry. You know, you have monolatry right there. Now you have to sort of decide, okay, you know, is it a henotheistic monolatry? Is it a polytheistic monolatry? Is it a monotheistic monolatry? And I think very, very quickly that the orthopraxis of Israelite religion basically almost has to collapse into monotheism. Because it's viewing God as transcendent. And once you have transcendence introduced into a henotheistic or pantheistic religion, it collapses, it almost automatically, within a generation, collapses into monotheism. The reverse, though, is also true. The reverse is also true. Whereas if you have an immanent concept of God, and that means God is everywhere, you know, all around us, you know, monotheism in turn collapses into either pantheism or monism. So I just think that based upon the clearer passages of Torah, that the Bible is the Pentateuch and, say, the Old Testament is definitely leaning towards a monolatry, but that monolatry is monarchical monotheism. So that's my reasons for holding that. And we do sort of see that, you know, even in passages where we have a council of gods, there's one major deity, and the rest are sort of like second rate. They're second rate gods at best. Okay. So you know, some have proposed that it was a polytheism that just conquered all other gods. Well, okay. If one god wins, what was the status of those other gods to begin with? It doesn't make a lot of sense. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to think these were all equal polytheistic gods in 1-1. You know, no. I'm not quite buying that. So, so anyway, thank you very much for the question. It was an interesting question. I hope that answered it. Okay, I think we're now on to the super chats. So, let's do while I'm up here. Our first super chat is from Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $5 US. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he asks, 1, how did God take Enoch if he were a tribe? Okay. Enoch is the what we call the progenitor. Okay. Now, here's the thing with progenitors. The progenitor is the most important person in a clan. And the thing with being a progenitor in a clan is that you can be both the guy that starts the clan at the very beginning or the most successful guy at the end of a clan. So he can get credit for the entire clan, whether or not he starts the clan at the beginning or whether or not he's the last most important member of the clan. And then a new clan takes over from him. Okay? So, yes, he was 65, and his tribe lived on 300 years. Okay? So, my guess is that his clan was named after him, and my guess here is that he is a progenitor at the end of, say, the clan, the most famous guy. And he's most famous because he was snatched into heaven, essentially. Okay? Yeah, that'll do it. You know, if a fiery chariot comes down and picks you up and takes you away, and people see this, oh yeah, you've earned your name as clan, as the clan progenitor. I mean, no matter who started the clan, I mean, you've really overshadowed him. Splashy events tend to do this. Okay. So I think he was more at the end of the lifespan of the clan when he was taken up. So that's my opinion on that. But he was 65 when the new clan was started. And that's the important bit here. But the clan did live on, say, another 300 years. So, that's my opinion on your first question. Now, your second question is on Genesis 47, 7 through 9. So let's pull that up. Genesis 47, 7 to 9. Okay, I'll pull up the Bible here. With emphasis on 9b. Okay. Then Joseph brought his father and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my sojourning are 130, few and unpleasant they have been the years of my life, nor have they been attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning." Okay. Now, the question is he really 131? And that's something that Bible scholars really debate. Most scholars are going to say, no, he's not really 131, but he is claiming the years of his clan. So that's essentially what's being sort of, what most scholars will sort of lean on, is that he is not actually 131, but he's claiming the years. In some sense, this can be hyperbole. Essentially, that he lived on, that his father was unnamed, but it was part of the clan, but he gets the credit for it. So there's that potential interpretation of that. Now, I haven't really just come down on a decision on this yet. I think there's other possibilities here too. The other possibility is that he's exaggerating how many years he's actually lived. Possible. I know there's some exegetes that do say this, that it's a sort of a means of him to sort of emphasize his status. We do get exaggerations of longevities that are done according to status. One of the most famous of these is actually the lifespan of Joseph. Joseph lived 110 years. Well, that just so happens to be the perfect age of an Egyptian sage. An Egyptian wise man was said to have lived 110 years. That's a canonical age. We see many examples of this in Egyptian texts. Nobody believes that these Egyptian sages actually lived 110 years. But we do recognize that this is a symbolic number. It's a symbolic number that is expressing that these people were incredibly wise, incredibly important, and incredibly and are honored by being given this sort of status, even though they didn't actually live to, say, they might have lived to like 89 or 80 or something like that, but they didn't really live 110 years. So when we get something like this, either one here is a possibility. It is possible that there was an excluded ancestor in this clan. It's also possible too that Jacob didn't actually live that long, but is being honored in this way, and that honoring is being put as words in his mouth. Either one's possible. I'll leave you to decide which one you think is correct. There's scholars on both sides of this, so again, it's all going to depend on what side of the bed you wake up on. And sometimes biblical interpretation comes down to that, because you do get sometimes equally good interpretations that are going to be based more upon hermeneutical method and how what approach you're taking to the text then it's actually clear cut. And this is just one of those cases where it's just not clear cut what exactly is the proper interpretation here. So maybe we'll get some more information at some point. Maybe we'll get some more evidence. That would be fantastic if we do. But I tend to lean more towards that there's a missing ancestor here. Essentially, that's being given the credit. But that's sort of my thoughts on this. But, I could be wrong too. Could be absolutely wrong on this. It could be, again, he might be just given an honorary age as well. It's possible. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it, and I hope that answered your question. Hey, the second super chat is also from Mr. Rich B.O.B. for $5 US. Thank you very much for the super chat. Okay. Thoughts on man is body and soul over body, soul with a body. I have heard Genesis 2 used for number 1. I see number 2 based on 1 John 2:27, 3-9. Is man tripartite? Okay. Ooh. Oh, wow. Well, remember I just said it sort of depends on what side of the bed you get out of? Is man bipartite or tripartite? At this point in time, I am almost leaning to tripartite. And there's actually a piece of, and it's not so much a biblical thing, it's more of a metaphysical thing. Now, just to answer your first question, okay? Genesis 2 makes, God creates the body, and he fills it with his breath of life, and he becomes a living nephesh, a living being, a living soul. The person is the soul, not the body. Okay? The flesh dies, the soul is the person. It goes to heaven. It is in the resurrection. It is given a new body. It is very clear that the biblical text sees the center of the person as the spiritual aspect, not the physical aspect. Okay? So physicalism is not something that's going to really resonate with what the biblical writers thought. Okay? Now, whether that physical identity is, whether that soul, mind, body union is bipartite or tripartite is debated. It's debated in Christian circles. You do get some Christians that say, well, you've got two parts, one part of the soul, two parts, and infinity from there. Essentially, if you're dealing with more than one spirit, then you're really not really dealing then with something that's tangible and easily to grasp. Okay, I get that argument. I understand that argument. My issue with that argument, however, is you do get passages, and this might be poetic, okay, where it says where the spirit contends with the nephesh, okay, where you have the nephesh arguing with the ruach or spirit. So you do get that in the scriptures, but there's also a very interesting piece of say psychological work that was done fairly recently that basically made an argument that one cannot be intelligent outside of a community. The idea is that when you express your idea to someone else, that person mulls it over and then responds to it. And then you respond to that response, and you get this dialogue that you cannot have any true intelligence unless there's that dialogue between thinking entities. The idea here is that in order for a person to be intelligent, there has to be a similar sort of community inside the brain, inside the mind. So that if you do have, say, the soul contending with the mind, or the soul contending with the spirit, that what you have in a person is a kind of community. A community that can basically work on ideas and make them better. So, as I said, this is psychological work that was done very recently, just only a couple of years ago. But the whole idea comes out of a study of sort of this interface between psychology and artificial intelligence. Like, for example, they've discovered that say, in neural networks, that neural networks that are, say, have divisions of independent thinking units produce better results than just, say, unified monolithic artificial intelligences. So, so there is some credence to the whole tripartite view of the soul. So, anyway, I hope that provided a little insight. It's highly debated. It's much debated. There are people who will take all sides of this issue, and you can't be dogmatic on this one. This one is just plain old. This one's interesting. There's a lot to consider here, and I think there's some really good stuff here that you can really chew into. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Happy chewing. Our third super chat is a really meaty question from Brick Creation for $50. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. Very long question, so this is why we have the whole thing sort of extracted here. And he asks, could the Magog battle happen during 1071 to 1097 when the Seljuk Turks conquered Israel in 1071, 1,000 years after the temple fell in 170 AD? Armies from Ezekiel 38, meteor falling from the sky, visions of Christ to Crusaders. I was considering preterism, which considers mystery Babylon as adulterous Israel. Her fall was recorded in Revelations 18. Also, 1,000 years plus, Little Season and Magog battle is mentioned in Revelation 27-9. Crusaders also saw a meteor fall in the enemy camp and saw visions of Jesus and St. Andrew during the siege of Antioch and won the battle. I found that interesting. Okay. Now, there's a lot in this question. But I think it comes down to this. Is how accurate does preterism really represent the, say, the various apocalyptic types of literature that we find in the New Testament? I know preterism has probably had the biggest upswing recently that's had probably in 1,000 years. People are much more likely to give preterism an audience today, especially given a lot of the, say, pre-tribulational looniness of the 1970s. So I get that. I understand that. I, however, am not taken by preterism. I think preterism has got some serious flaws. I tend to still lean more towards futurism for apocalyptic literature than I do for, say preterism. I don't think preterism really it doesn't engage apocalyptic literature in the way it's written, which is sort of a recontextualization with every generation. I also have a problem here with, say, the idea that the invasion of Israel in 1071 is the Battle of Magog. Okay. Some of this is the fact that that Israel is actually no longer really in the Holy Land at this point. And the fall of Israel is meant to be the final fall of the nation of Israel. Okay, the fall in the preterist perspective, the mystery Babylon as adulterous Israel also spells her final ruin. Also, okay, and while say the deportation of the Israelites during the Bar Kokhba rebellion was definitely a fault, they didn't disappear. They weren't ultimately judged here. They were just dispersed. This created the diaspora of the Jewish people across basically Europe and into, say, Mesopotamia. Okay, so I think preterism here has some serious shortcomings. Now, they might have a point. Maybe it is Israel, maybe it's not. I kind of doubt it. Adulterous, the mystery Babylon could just as much be the adulterous church as it is the adulterous Israel. Okay? So, if you're going to go that way, if you're going to go one way, you pretty much have to go the other way too. So, and frankly, the church being adulterous, the mystery Babylon, is almost more likely, to be honest, than even adulterous Israel. Because, we've already seen that divorce happen. So yeah, I've got some real issues here with this whole preterist interpretation. I also think too that there's times when, say, preterism sort of, it has to sort of backtrack all the way to an early dating for the Book of Revelation, and that doesn't jive very well with church history either. It just doesn't. It's not a good rendering. There are keys in the text that seem to allude to a later writing of the Book of Revelation, sometime around the end of the 1st century, not mid 1st century, not dating to the time of Paul, but to basically the later period at the end of the 1st century. So I've got some serious historical issues here to pick with preterism as well. But that's more than I can actually deal with in a question like this. So that would take some time, and that would take some unpacking to do. But I've got, as I say, I've got some concerns here. I mean, also the whole idea that's 1,000 years exactly is also probably not consistent with apocalyptic literature either, which tends to be more not intended to be exactly 1,000 years, just an extended long time. Essentially the same sort of view that we would the 480 of 1 Kings 6:1. I think the 1,000 years here is a euphemism. It's a euphemism. Instead, we're dealing here with a Greek euphemism, not a Hebrew euphemism, for an extended long period of time. So, yeah, there's more issues. There's a lot of issues here. A lot of moving pieces, and I'm just not convinced by the preterist case. So anyway, I hope that answers the question somewhat. We are going to be doing a series on eschatology, but we are starting to put it together now. It's taking some time, and we'll get there. But hopefully, once we start rolling out videos on eschatology, it'll bring some clarity to all this as well. So anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat. It was a good question. It's a great question, but I don't think despite all the cosmetics here, that it's going to work out in the end. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. And Shabbat Shalom Pesach. Okay, let's get to the Twitches now. Okay, and alrighty. Our next super chat comes from Redditoids belong in jail for $10. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. I don't know if Redditoids belong in jail. I think they do need their knuckles wrapped, but a little corporal punishment wouldn't do them harm. Okay, and he asks, since you're familiar with JPE&D, he means the documentary hypothesis, what is your view on the scholarly consensus that D was a forgery written during Josiah's time to justify his reforms? Thanks for your hard work. Okay. The Deuteronomist view, the Deuteronomist is the idea that Deuteronomy and basically the Deuteronomist was characterized by things that are of, say, priestly, the laws, the sort of the sundry religious laws. I don't think it was a forgery. I mean, when we look at, say, the Book of Deuteronomy, it does really much have the characteristics of various laws that we find across the ancient Near East in the late Bronze Age. I don't think it's a forgery. I don't think it might have been, say, complete. I mean, there might be some room here for some edits and some expansions. It's always possible. I don't see compelling evidence for it. I'd love to see better evidence for that. If that's where they want to go with it, okay, well, convince me. Show me. From all the presentations I've seen, going back from when I was in university to basically modern counterparts, one of the frustrating things about basically modern advocates of the documentary hypothesis, is that every advocate of the documentary hypothesis has a different division of the Pentateuch with different redactors for different texts. There doesn't seem to be any agreement here at all. I mean, you'll get Von Rod differing with Joel Baden on which redactors did what. And it just gets crazy. It just gets crazy. Every scholar is coming at the text with different presuppositions and end up with very much different things. I mean, the only thing they can agree on is that D was a late forgery. That's about what they can agree on, but they can't agree on what texts are those. So it's sort of hard to take that all too seriously. So how do you really justify this? How does it, how do you even say that, well, the scholars' consensus that D was that the Deuteronomists were forgeries, when they can't even agree on what the Deuteronomists were, what text they were. So, yeah, that's sort of my view on this. It's just, okay, you want to show me it? Show me some consistency. At least if we had some consistency here, we could then examine the text and say, okay, this works and this doesn't. But because there's no consistency across the board on which texts are actually D, you're then arguing individual views of individual scholars, and that's just a mess. And really, that shows how inadequate the theory is. So anyway, I hope that provided a little insight. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. We have a $10 super chat from the Camel Leopard. Thank you very much. Hag Pesach Samayach. Well, Hag Pesach Samayach to you as well. And Shabbat Shalom. We have to remember this. Also Shabbat. Thoughts on when the Last Supper was? John seems to suggest that they were on the day of preparation before Pesach. It does seem that they were celebrating Pesach before Shabbat. Okay, so and you continue, but the synoptics seem to suggest the first day of Matzah, and it's possible. And I think what we have here is that that the first that they are celebrating the Last Supper, more or less, the night before the Sabbath. So the night before the Sabbath, they are celebrating the Seder. Okay, so I would say it is possible that this could be the first day of Matzah, but it does seem that this is the Pesach. This is the Pesach, and is the next day that they are in the Sabbath. Okay, so it does seem that in this particular in when the Last Supper was during, say, Pesach, but it was on the Thursday, not the Friday. And a lot of commentators have noted this, that the Passover supper that they were celebrating was not actually on the day of the Sabbath, because one of the things that the Gospels note was that they had to get Christ's body down from the cross and buried because it was the Sabbath. And to have taken a body down would have defiled the Sabbath. So that does seem to be the case here, is that the Passover was on the Thursday, and the crucifixion was on the Friday. So that does seem to be the sequence of events. We also have to be very, very careful too that when we read some of these passages as well, how do I say this? Prepositions get very sticky on some of these passages. So you have to be very, very attentive to the prepositions, because if you don't pay very, very close attention to the prepositions, not to mention when the Jewish day starts and stops, things can get dicey fast. So you have to be very, very attentive to your reading when you do look at these passages. And that's because of the trickiness of Greek prepositions, especially when it starts talking about the genitive and the dative here. Okay? So, but that's how I understand the sequence of events, is that you had the Passover on the Thursday, you had the crucifixion on the Friday, and then you had the resurrection on the Sunday. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. It is a great question, and it's a question people do ask, especially this time of year. Okay. 501 Mobius, super chat for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. He goes, Happy Good Friday. Well, Happy Good Friday to you too. And it is good indeed. So, this is really, really appreciate your well wishes here. Thank you very much for the super chat. Your super chats are your support of our channel really, really is important to us. It helps us. It helps us continue to do the work, and we very much appreciate it. And I'm glad you made it here tonight. It's good to see you, and Happy Good Friday to you too. Thank you very much for the super chat. Okay, we got a very generous super chat from Sinaiacus Apologia for $100. Well, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciate that. Okay, and he asks, does Satan have any connection with Egyptian myth? Yag Pesach Samayach. Yag Pesach Samayach to you as well. Okay, now we have to kind of understand a couple things here. Satan, the term Satan, Hasatan, is it's kind of a job description. It means the accuser, and it's sort of a job description. Now, we do find the term used a little bit in the Old Testament, especially in the book of Job, where you have the Hasatan, the accuser, level the charges against Job, that he's an unfaithful servant and all that. Okay? But we don't see anything quite similar in Egyptian myth. Now, Egyptian myth does have, say, its more malevolent aspects, but the problem when we start getting into Egyptian myth is that any god in Egyptian myth can have both a good and a bad coming. basically a good side and a bad side. So deities in Egyptian myth were ambivalent. Okay, they can be both good and bad. So this is one of the reasons why you don't actually have a god of evil, really, in Egyptian myth. Because Egyptian myth, any god could, in the right circumstances, be evil. It's the dual nature of all deity in ancient Egypt. Now, later on in, say, the late period, you are going to get, especially with the say, the popularity of the contentions of Seth and Horus, there will be some spin upon that conflict where Seth is given more malevolent tendencies. And some people have suggested that this is a Satan figure, but we have to already understand that by, say, the late period, a lot of, say, biblical literature has already been written, and has its sort of been set in stone. So I don't see a huge connection between, say, those later developments in Egyptian myth and, say, the connection of, say, Satan in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament. So I just don't see it. I don't think there's a strong connection there. There is the idea that you do get later on in, say, Egyptian myth, punishment of the deceased, which you do find starting in the New Kingdom period. That sort of happens a lot earlier. But, it's like, for example, some especially mythicists, some mythicists have suggested that Seth, the god Seth, is Satan. That we get, the biblical view of Satan comes from the god Seth or Sutek. And it's not. It doesn't come from there at all. Seth is he's a storm deity. He's a storm deity. He's a deity of unbridled power. Okay, he's a god of unbridled power. But he isn't Satan per se. And I really hate when mythicists do this. I think a lot of the junk that mythicists do is just so unhistorical. It's not even funny. It's not even funny. So, anyway, thank you for that extremely generous super chat. Your generosity has really supported this channel and really helps keep things going. And we so appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I hope that answered your question. Okay. Cole Walker for $10. Thank you very much for your super chat. And he says, no question, Dr. Falk. Just wanted to thank you. Oh, you're so welcome. We need more teachers like you. If you would ever like to get help timestamps for the cues so they can be added for easier reference later, I'd be happy to. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the super chat. We would love to timestamp these. I used to timestamp these, and then I just became overwhelmed. The problem is, with the, we do this part-time. I have I guess almost a full-time job, and the rest of my time is devoted to the channel. And we just get stretched thin. It used to be that I could just go back and, say, the Monday after, just sort of, index the questions. I don't know. I'm still not technically savvy enough with YouTube to understand how to take timestamps and chop the videos up into questions. I've seen that some channels are able to do that, where they can actually break up the questions into sections. And I just don't know how to technically do that. I mean, it's not that I'm technically unsavvy. It's just I haven't had the time to figure it out. So, we'd love it if you could do this, but it's something that we don't know exactly the mechanics of actually getting it all to work. So it's something we want to do. It's something we want to do, and we know we have to do it. It's just that finding the time to do it, and finding the time to just figure out how to do it, is presenting us with difficulties. So it's butter stretched too thin across a piece of toast. So that's basically what's going on. Is we're sort of stretched too thin, limited amount of hands and so much work. But we'll definitely keep you in mind. Should we actually have the time to figure out how to do this? So anyway, thank you very much for the offer. Thank you very much for the super chat, and I'm so glad it's helping. So very much appreciate it. Okay, the Camel Leopard again for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do you think Judas Iscariot was a zealot? I've been looking at it, and it seems to make a lot of sense. I'm not sure. The name Iscariot is very, very suggestive of a zealot. Okay, and many Bible scholars have noted this. But I can't say for sure. The New Testament is not real. It's a little bit outside of my field already. At this point, I would just say it's reasonable. I haven't looked into the issue myself, honestly. I might be just basically confirming something that's been refuted, years ago. I can't say because, again, haven't looked into this close enough. But I have heard scholars say this. Whether or not those scholars are correct, I don't know. Okay, so it does make sense. It does make sense, at least on the surface. So that's probably the best I can give you at the moment. But anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat. I very, very much appreciate it. But I can't give you a better answer than that. So thank you very much. Okay. Super chat from Bryce Bell for $14.99 Australian. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate it. Just memeing it. Yeah. Blessings from Australia. Well, one of the things I have learned through this whole process of having a YouTube channel is how memeable I am. I mean, very memeable. It all began when I did that my first popcorn review of Inspiring Philosophy's original Exodus Rediscovered video, and I did that belly laugh that I think that thing's been memed so many times. I mean, it's not even funny. I mean, I still see new memes come up with that. It's just like, okay. Yes, I have discovered I am very, very memeable. I mean, people have memed my popcorn bowl. They've memed the laugh. They've memed the fact that when I show up, my opponents just run and hide. So yeah, I've discovered that I am very, very memeable. Even Mr. Empty Conjecture, he's memeable. The mana machines become memeable. I'm just a walking meme. What can I say? But at least I can laugh about it. I used to say, I never expected to be so memeable. But anyway, I want to thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. And it's very, very humorous too. It's very, very humorous too. Who knows? We might do an episode just on Dr. Falk memes. So anyway, Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, we have another incredibly generous super chat tonight from Moise Salazar. Thank you very much for that super chat. Wow. Very, very much appreciate that. That's very generous. And again, your generosity really helps us to keep things going. It's no secret that March was a very lean year, so super chats like this are just so incredibly helpful. So, very, very much appreciate it. And he asks, or says, Dr. Falk, what part of the Holy Scriptures caused you more personal conflict? For me, was the Joseph conquest of violent language from Yahweh. Today, I think I understand the text better. Okay. There is actually one book that keeps me awake at night. It really, really does. And it's not what most people think. Actually, the Joshua conquest, I pretty much understand that. I pretty much understand what's going on there. I understand the hyperbole. I understand the what the point of the conquest was. That really doesn't keep me awake anymore. It doesn't even provide me even with personal conflict. The one book that sort of keeps me awake at night, if I'm very, very honest about this, is the book of Hebrews. It's not so much that it creates personal conflict for me, but the book of Hebrews terrifies me. Absolutely terrifies me. Anyone who reads the book of Hebrews and isn't terrified by it doesn't understand it. You see, I read the book of Joshua. I don't have a problem with it because I understand it. I have difficulties with the book of Hebrews because I understand it. And what is so terrifying about the book of Hebrews is how easily somebody can think they're in the faith and not be in the faith. So, that's sort of, Book of Revelation doesn't scare me. Book of Joshua, Judges, I don't have a lot of conflict, doesn't provoke much conflict in me. Hebrews, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. The book of Hebrews is really almost like the sower and the seeds parable explained. It really is. It's really that basically it's teased out. And Hebrews, you get passages like Hebrews chapter 2 where it talks about people who lose their faith like a ring slipping off a finger. It's like you don't even notice it. You don't even notice it and you're outside the faith. Yeah, that's terrifying stuff. That is terrifying stuff. Or people who have, like in Hebrews 6, where it talks about those who've tasted of the goodness of God, experienced the new life to come, who have received the blessing, and then turn away. It's terrifying. You look at the Hebrews chapter 6 and it's almost the definition of a modern evangelical Christian. And yet, they've completely turned away from the faith and it becomes an abomination to them. And they become unredeemable. There's some terrifying language in the book of Hebrews. Absolutely terrifying language. So, that's the one that gives me the cold sweats at night. That's the one that gives me the cold sweats. The rest of it's pretty much easy. For me, the rest of it's easy. Romans is deep theology. You could chew on that for a long, 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 long time. But it isn't. I'm sometimes basically say that Romans is the carrot, Hebrews is the stick. Very, very, very hard to to really read Hebrews without just going, am I really in the faith? It really causes you to question that. So, yeah. If you understand Hebrews, yeah, you should be afraid. Yeah, that's the one that's the one that gives me the most personal conflict. And it gives me a personal conflict because I don't like being afraid. I don't like being afraid, but there is an aspect of, there's two aspects of Hebrews. The first aspect is nothing is greater than Christ. Okay, that's sort of the happy side of the book of Hebrews. The other side is about apostasy. And it's almost split 50-50, where it goes, it sort of oscillates between Christ is most supreme, and this is the apostasy. Christ is better than Moses. Here's another form of apostasy. Christ is greater than the temple. Here's another form of apostasy. So you have to sort of expect that when you read that. It's just really, yeah. So that's my personal opinion of what gives me nightmares when I read scripture, and what gives me personal conflict. So anyway, I hope that answered your question. Thank you very much for that really, really generous super chat. It does keep our ministry going. It does help us to come every week and to do these live streams. And it helps to keep the lights on. So very, very much appreciated. Thank you so very much. And I hope that answered your question. Okay. WQ for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Besides the Pharaoh's dynasty, were there any long-standing important noble dynasties in Egypt that lasted a considerable amount of time? Actually, there were. There were actually several, or actually many noble families in Egypt. Okay, now, not all of them ruled. Okay, not all of them became pharaoh. Even say the noble families of Egypt, sometimes not all of them, like for example, the hereditary rulers of say Memphis were the kings of the Old Kingdom, up until say Dynasty 10 or 11. After that, you had the Theban noble family then take over as king. And they did so until, say, the end of Dynasty 18, with some breaks in between, roughly. That Theban royal family is the longest, say, reigning royal family in Egypt. But you had other clans and other noble families as well. Every province had a hereditary, what they call a nomarch, essentially a governor. So every province had a hereditary governor. And these were the noble families that constituted the power base of Egypt, were these nomarchs. Okay? So absolutely, every province had its own nomarch. Every kings would essentially exchange wives with these nomarchs to maintain that power base. So, and many of these nomarchs reigned for centuries. These families of nomarchs would reign for centuries. So, absolutely, Egypt had many royal families, or noble families. Some were royal, some were not. Some fell out of favor. Like, for example, the Memphites. They fall out of favor. They lose ultimately to the Thebans, but they still maintain a status as a noble family. So, anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, Angel WVM for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. On the off chance that the curse amulet of Mount Ebel is true, does it challenge the late Exodus date? Actually, no, it doesn't. This is why it doesn't. Okay, now we have to understand some things about the Ebel inscription. One is that it was found in a fill pile from a specific archaeological context. Okay, that archaeological context is basically the transition period from late Bronze 2B to Iron Age 1. Okay, so that's the context of that fill pile, and that's where that little cursed amulet was found. The problem is, Associates for Biblical Research doesn't like that result. Never has. They've been fighting with Martin Sertel ever since he came out with his provisional reports on the site at Mount Ebel. Martin Sertel was actually the lead archaeologist at, Adam Sertel was the lead archaeologist at Mount Ebel. Okay. And Sertel got ABR in there because cheap labor. Cheap labor, essentially. But Sertel was not about to base his interpretation of the site based upon the wants and desires of Associates for Biblical Research. And that's sort of the conflict here that's going on. In order to get that early date of the Exodus, what they have to do is they have to basically read the paleography and then interpret that paleography as being older than the contents of the fill itself. So this is very strange. This is very, very strange. I mean, really, really strange that you would have, say, one outlier, one subjective piece of evidence that's such an outlier that you're going to ignore all the objective evidence. It's a very, very strange approach to archaeology. Yeah, Sertel is also now deceased, so he can't argue it. Although there's been a lot of good publications. Ralph Hawkins did his dissertation on Mount Ebel, and that's a very, very good dissertation. It's excellent, and he did publish it. I don't know if he published it. I think he published it in Brill, but it's an excellent dissertation. So, part of the problem too is we don't actually have a reference of what constitutes early Hebrew paleography. So, the earliest paleography we actually have of that's verified Hebrew comes from the 7th century BC, maybe a little early, maybe the 10th century BC. But we don't have anything from the 12th century BC. And we certainly have nothing from the 14th century, if we even have any Hebrew at all from the 14th century. So, them going off and saying that, well, the paleography of this Hebrew tablet, shows that, it's really, really early. There's no basis for that. It's just crazy. And the radioisotope analysis they did of the lead only shows that it was late Bronze Age. Well, that's a huge range of time. That could be anything from, say, 1500 BC to 1100 BC. So that's, you're not gonna be able to draw a conclusion on that. So, they would have to do a lot more. They'd have to do a lot more to show that this is as early as they claimed. And I don't think they've done their due diligence here. Everything I've seen so far shows me that they haven't done their due diligence. And basically, they've picked epigraphers that have a certain axe to grind. It's really unfortunate. It's just really unfortunate. Because this could be a very important find. It could be a find that does shed light on the period. But what's going to end up happening is that the archaeologists involved are going to discredit the find because of their ideological bent here. And I think that's unfortunate, because if they had taken it in its context, without the ideology, it could have it has the potential to be something very, very meaningful. It's sad. It's sad. It grieves me. It grieves me that that it really is coming down to this. But you know, I don't see how they can maintain this, honestly. Right now, I think some of this too is trying to basically win the hearts of donors too. I mean, there is an aspect of here involved with that. It is no secret that ABR is getting a lot of donations out of this. You know, evangelicals do see this. They see results. You know, evangelicals, especially ones big donors who donate to archaeological digs, look for these flashy finds and see big results, and they want to support that, not knowing that it's snake oil. So, this will undoubtedly fund ABR for years to come, and they only have to keep this facade going for, you know, a year. People will forget when it's poo-pooed, when it's discounted, credited. Oh, they can just dismiss that then as, you know, we're being persecuted because of atheist scholars, when it's really that their bad methodology from the very beginning, and, you know, just terrible ideology. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. Thank you very much for the super chat. I do appreciate it. It does get me hot under the collar, because this could have been something much, much better. All right, Faye of the Duat for $2. Thank you very much. It's good to see you here tonight. I like the change of name. She says she can't short word again, rolling on the floor laughing. Well, let's see what you've got here. Okay, your next text here is that very likely going back to the Oriental Institute this week will definitely correct more bad APR people. Ooh. You're making this a contact sport. Gladiatorial sport. Wow, aren't they a bit much? That's all I can say is, wow. Love the OI, though. I mean, it's a great museum. It's a great little a university museum. You do get a few of these university museums that are actually quite good, and the OI is really one of the better ones. The University of Liverpool had one that is okay. It's okay. It's not for a university. I mean, most university museums are more or less teaching universities, or teaching museums. They're teaching museums. They're meant to sort of teach things like how to curate a museum, how to do proper custodial management. And the OI is definitely one of those teaching museums. So it's a great museum. Been there several times when I lived in Chicago. Loved it. It's absolutely fantastic for, you know, and it's got some great stuff on exhibit. So definitely love it. I mean, anyone who goes there is going to have a good time. It's just really good. Actually, it's very interesting too. If you're lucky, you can sometimes stumble in even lectures. Like my wife and we're there during a Friday once at the OI, and we just happened to be there when Wagner gave his lecture on he discovered the tomb of Senwosret III at Abydos, and it was fascinating. Fascinating lecture. We just happened to be there just as the OI was closing, and we were there till closing time, and then we got out of the OI, rushed out, And it's like, oh yeah, there's this great lecture going on just right now. Come on in and listen. It's like, oh cool, we'll hang around another extra hour or two. And yeah, it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So she also adds, I happened to upon Ted Wright almost through hands. I bet. Yeah, he doesn't have a sense of humor about that stuff. Oh, poor Ted. He thinks he knows stuff. He doesn't. Yeah. So anyway, I want to thank you for that super chat. Very, very much appreciated, and I wish you happy hunting when you go to the OI. Okay, is that it for the super chats? Nope, we got a few more here. Go scroll back here. Oh, he can't do much of anything. Not only can the guy not read a plaque, I mean, oh my gosh. It's embarrassing sometimes, but he's an apologist. You know, that's his. I mean, he's a shill. All he does, I mean, that's his job, is to be an apologist for ABR. You know, he's not an archaeologist. You know, he's got a bachelor's degree in, I think, archaeology and apologetics, and I think he's got a master's degree in Christian apologetics. That doesn't make you an archaeologist. That doesn't make you an ancient Near Eastern specialist. You know, so, you know, the guy's incredibly incompetent, but he's the voice of ABR. So, all right, the next super chat is from Linguist Amulet for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. No question, but I just want to say that I value your work and what you have accomplished here with your channel. Great you make time for this, smiling face. Okay, well, thank you very much for the encouragement. Thank you very much for the super chat. I'm glad you value the work. We try to make this quality education. We also try to make it entertaining too. We are very, very proud of what we've been able to accomplish in such short time. We're almost on to 2 years now, and wow, it's gone by so fast. I have not. It's my head's spinning. You know, my head's spinning. You know, we did our first video on May 5th, 2020. Yeah, Cinco de Mayo. Yeah. So it's almost been 2 years. We're 20 days short of actually 2 full years. And it's been a roller coaster. It's been an absolute roller coaster. You know, we have put out videos. We have been both praised and vilified. We've been told that we are the future of teaching ministries on YouTube. We've also been told that we're public enemy number 1. So, you know, if half the people hate you and half the people love you, well, you're probably doing something right, at least. Maybe not everything right, but something you're doing right. So we are very, very encouraged by all our supporters. You know, I get emails every week, and I know if I don't answer your emails, please forgive me. I'm terrible about emails now. That's what this live stream is for, is to take the place of me having to answer all those emails. I just can't answer them. I just don't have the time. I wish I did. So I apologize to anyone who has sent me an email. I just probably will not get to it because I'm out of time. So that's why we do these live streams. It's easier for me to give a 5-minute response saying, hey, you know, glad this you like this. Thank you so much. Or we go by and answer in a non-super chat where we go, hey, okay, here's the answer to your question. But I don't have the time anymore just to answer emails. So unless it's something like from like a colleague, or it's something to do with some piece of writing I'm doing, I just don't get to my emails anymore. So it's just one of those unfortunate things that, you know, as this channel grows, more and more people are trying to take a piece of my time, and it's just, I have to prioritize here. So, so anyway, I thank you very much for the super chat. I'm really, really glad that this is helping. I'm glad that that people are benefiting, because we wanted this to be of a benefit. You know, I think one of the things that channels, especially channels of a particular like scholarly nature, you know, one of the things about being a scholar is you tend to be very, very specialized, and the downside of being a specialist is you don't have a lot of range. So, you know, there's an old joke in PhD studies. You get, you know, more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing at all. And in many respects, that really does sort of encapsulate modern scholarship, where you don't have a lot of breadth, but what you do know very, very well. Now, that works very, very well in the academy. Works very well in the academy. Doesn't work so well on YouTube. You do have to be a little more of a generalist on YouTube. So we do try to make sure that our content here on YouTube is diverse enough that it appeals to, you know, people who are here to learn a bit about Egypt, who are here to learn about the Bible, who are here to learn about religion of the ancient Near East. So we're trying to create content that isn't just on one subject, that isn't just on the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, although the Ark of the Covenant is interesting too, and it's a personal favorite subject of mine. Okay, but we want to make sure it's broader than that, so that other people can benefit as well. So I'm so glad you enjoy the channel. I'm so glad you've gotten something out of this. Thank you so much for that super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, another super chat for $10 from Amir Eshifra. And he said, "Hi, Dr. Falk. I came across a response to your interview on Garfield's channel. Apparently, one of the kings of Samaria was a Cushite, because Cush in Egyptian and Cush in Samaritan are the same, no vowels." Oh, boy. Yeah, I saw that response. Wow, that was bad. You know, you'd like a response to have some credibility to it before you really engage it. You know, otherwise you start looking like you're starting to punch down. And I saw that, I did see that response, and it was just like, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It was so divorced from reality, and then you're just going, yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, definitely does not work that way. Okay, so, you know, this is what's called, I mean, even if it was correct here, and he probably isn't, the problem with what Cush is in Sumerian is it's probably Gish, not Cush. The problem is that when you're dealing with Mesopotamian languages, you're dealing with graphemes, written symbols, that have multiple phonemes. Okay? And when you start dealing with languages that have multiple phonemes for graphemes, it is really, really easy to make false etymological comparisons. So we do know that the phoneme Cush is also Gish. and is often gish. So, yeah, when I saw that, I just went, oh, really? Here's a guy that knows nothing about ancient languages trying to critique something he doesn't understand. So, yeah. Yeah, I saw it too, and I just shook my head. I just could not believe what I was seeing. But then again, too, you kind of see here that what sometimes passes as apologetics in the conscious community. And for those not familiar with the conscious community, it's sort of a revival Egyptian religion, especially amongst African Americans in America here. So, yeah, what often passes for apologetics amongst the conscious community is not very thorough, does not have a strong understanding of ancient languages, and usually has some sort of faulty reasoning. So, again, I don't want to beat down on the guy, but, you know, yeah, I saw it and was shaking my head too. So anyway, thank you very much for that super chat. Very, very much appreciate it. Okay, the Camel Leopard for $5 again. Thank you very much for the super chat. Last New Covenant question. Could you explain how Messiah was in the tomb for 3 days and nights from Friday to Sunday? Okay. Now, we have to understand it's not 3 days and 3 nights like we would calculate it. The text says literally into the 3rd day he arose. Okay? Now, the Jewish calendar is sunset. The Jewish day is sunset to sunset. Okay? So, he has to be buried before sunset on Friday. That's Jewish law. You know, otherwise they're breaking the Sabbath. Okay. So, day 1 is that Friday. Okay? So he's got to be in that day. Okay, so then you've got that Saturday, the Sabbath, which is Friday night to night. So Saturday night is the 2nd day. So, and then into the 3rd day, Sunday morning, he arises. Okay. So it doesn't have to be 3 complete days and 3 nights. Sort of the way that the Jews, the Israelites counted is you have 1 year, you have 2 years, and then you have a day. That's 3 years. Okay? Part of a year is a year. Part of a day is a day. Okay? So it's not full days, but it's like 2 and a partial days, which they do credit as 3. Okay, so that's how that generally works. So he's buried on the Friday before sunset. So you got 1 day, and then the 2nd day, which is a Saturday, and then you got the morning of Sunday, which is into the 3rd day, which is really actually, you know, part of that Saturday. So it's into the 3rd day he arises. So that's how that works. So I hope that explains how that works. So it's not full days, and the text doesn't say it's full days, but it does say into the 3rd day. And this is where exegesis comes into really, really important things, because it's really easy to misunderstand if you don't understand the exegetical nuances here. So I hope that answered the question. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated. Got a super chat here from Jack Ray for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you. I look forward to your stream every week. Well, you're most welcome. I'm glad someone looks forward to it. I think some people dread it, but I'm glad some people look forward to it. Actually, to be honest, I look forward to it too. This is my highlight of the week. This is what I look forward to every week. You know, the Monday videos are our core teaching, but the Q&A is our opportunity to get in contact with the people who actually watch us, and we do love the interaction. We've got a great community here. We are absolutely thoroughly blessed by a fantastic community. We love the questions. We love the interaction. We prize this. It's a one opportunity to get feedback, and frankly, after we get done here, I actually go back and I actually read the entire live chat, and so even if I don't catch your comment during the live stream, I go back and I read them. I read every comment in the live stream, so I make sure that I read them all. Because it's just a joy to actually see what people are saying, how they're interacting with the questions. I do love some of the debate that goes on in the live chat. It's precious to us. It's really, really precious to us. And we do very much enjoy this. As I say, we look forward to this just as much as you do. Maybe a little more. So, thank you very much for the super chat. And I'm so glad you enjoyed the live streams. Okay, and we've got a $20 super chat from Sean Horton. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate that. Is the idea that Genesis 1 and 2 are evidence of J and P plus a sloppy redactor, and the idea that the opening of Genesis is similar to surrounding ancient Near Eastern texts, usually held at the same time by the same person? Oh boy. Well, again, it's all going to depend upon which scholar you ask. Some will say it's J, some will say it's P. A lot of them will say it's E, because it's Elohist. You know, you have Elohim. So a lot of them will say give Genesis 1 to E and Genesis 2 to either J or P. Okay, almost none of them will assign it to D. But you know, it is clear that Genesis 1 and 2 is interacting with ancient Near Eastern texts, particularly Bronze Age ancient Near Eastern texts, although that is somewhat contested. But it is very, very controversial which redactors were responsible for which portions of Genesis 1 or 2. So again, mileage will vary depending on which scholar is saying what, really. Ultimately, its criteria is going to be very, very different depending on who is doing the analysis, what criteria they're using to make their divisions of redaction, their authorship, their source texts. However, I also want to say this too, that Genesis 1 and 2 are not, say, copies of anything we find specifically in the ancient Near East. And this is probably a very, very important factor that, say, the documentary hypothesis doesn't actually adequately cover, which is there's the echo of certain ancient Near Eastern texts like Enuma Elish. There's the echo of say, the Memphite theology. There's the echo of various different creation myths. And it's almost like Genesis 1 and 2 is basically a synthesis of every creation myth. Not just something taken out of Mesopotamia, not just something taken out of Egypt. It's interacting with those texts. It's interacting with those mythologies. But it isn't copying them. And I think that's a very, very important point when we start talking about a book like Genesis, is that it's taking many sources, many forms of what they call intertextuality. People who do literature studies say you can't have literature without intertextuality. Because intertextuality is what grounds your text in reality. It's what grounds your text into the world. If you didn't have intertextuality, you would just have some floating text without any context. So you need that intertextuality to create context. And Genesis 1 and 2 do definitely have intertextuality. But it's not a copy. It's engagement. And I think a lot of the people that say, Genesis 1 and 2 are a ripoff of Atrahasis or Enuma Elish, I don't take into account that if you just look at, say, the ideas are sort of alluded to, but the wording is so off. It's so distant. There's just no repetition of wording. No repetition of phraseology. If you don't have the repetition of wording, you don't actually have a copy. You have a paraphrase, at best. And paraphrases aren't copying per se. It's borrowing the ideas, but not the words. So I think it's very, very difficult to make the case that the opening of Genesis is a copy of surrounding ancient Near Eastern texts, but it is definitely interacting with them. And frankly, too, the documentary hypothesis here doesn't actually help that any, because once you start getting into, say, the dating of sources such as J and P, well, you're at that point almost outside of, say, the ancient Near Eastern texts that it's clearly supposedly interacting with. So it's almost self-defeating to go down that road of the documentary hypothesis while still maintaining that ancient Near Eastern texts are being copied into it. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Another super chat from Cole Walker for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do you have any recommendations for resources on Gnosticism? I did publish my master's thesis, which was on Gnosticism, which basically goes into just the bare bones of what is Gnosticism, what is it like as far as a religious movement goes, and I think it was called the Egyptian Origins of Gnosticism. It's very expensive, though. It's very, very expensive. It's like $70 for this, like 120-page book. So, there's a lot of diverse opinions on Gnosticism. Yamauchi wrote a book on Gnosticism. It was okay. It wasn't great. Yamauchi was trying to engage Rudolf Bultmann's view on Gnosticism, and both are wrong. Essentially, Rudolf Boltman held the view that Gnosticism emerged from Mandeanism, and it's actually the other way around. And in doing so, Yamauchi ascribes Gnosticism to a late emergence view that I don't think the evidence supports. So, yeah, it's one of those things where Yamauchi, who I respect, by the way, I very, very much deeply respected Yamauchi. I think he's passed away now, but Edwin Yamauchi. But I don't think I don't think there's a lot of excellent resources on Gnosticism. There's a lot of people playing in this field. Bart Ehrman's one of them. But good resources on Gnosticism are hard to find. They're really hard to find. Because people who tend to go into Gnostic studies, they tend to be of one of two veins. They tend to be either New Testament scholars that dabble into Gnosticism but don't really understand it all that well. Or you get people who specialize in Gnosticism but tend to be of the idea of the many Gospels view, which basically holds that the Gnostics and the early Christian Gospels were a set of many Gospels, and basically the victors got to choose the true Gospels. Yeah, and I'm not buying that either. I think that's malarkey as well. I think historically it's pretty easy to show that the Gnostics had their Gospels, the Christians had their Gospels, and it was more of a competition between two separate camps. So I can't really recommend. I haven't seen a really good book on Gnosticism that I can fully endorse here. So anyway, not that helpful probably, unless you want to buy my book on it. But it's really expensive, so. It is a good book. It's a good book, and I think it brings a reasonable approach to Gnosticism, a reasonable approach to it, which is much better than, say, a late emergence of Gnosticism and basically the multiple gospel theory. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. I hope that helped. Okay, and. Another super chat from Sean Horton. Thank you very much for the super chat for $20. Very much appreciated. Commentary pointing out the wordplays in 11:1-9 Babel has made me want to look into learning Hebrew. Yeah, there's a lot of wordplay in Hebrew. A lot of it. Suggested books, place to learn outside of a university or seminary. If I wind up in a seminary in a few years, I'm blaming you. Oh boy. Yeah, okay. Oh, that's a terrible thing to lay on a guy.
We have perpetuated the false things throughout seminary. Professors will also blame you.
Yeah, the professors will blame me also. Well, the ironic thing is seminaries are using my materials who wouldn't ever have me as an instructor. So I do take a small comfort in that. I know that my materials are being used in seminaries. So it's the irony of ironies that the books I write, the papers I write, have been used in seminaries and in their course syllabus. And yet they would never have me teach in their seminary. So the irony has not been lost on me. However, wordplay. I don't know if I can. I don't know a good book off the top of my head on word plays in Hebrew, but there are many of them. There are many of them. Names, boy oh boy, names in the Hebrew Bible are definitely word plays. One of the, like for example, Nabal, the rich guy who sort of denied King David hospitality. You know, the word name means fool in Hebrew. You know, it means fool. You know, the original two children of Ruth. One of them, Milcah, means sickness. You know, no mother names their child sickness. You know, no mother names their child fool. But you do find these names in Scripture. And they're word plays. They're play on words. They're word plays to provide a didactic purpose. Okay. So I don't know where you'd find this outside of commentaries, though. I don't know if anyone has collected this into all one place. It'd be very interesting if somebody did. But again, I'm not aware of any aggregated book on this. When I look for this stuff, I always go to commentaries. So, yes.
Are you done? Somebody sent a
Okay. Someone. Okay.
It's underneath Zealot 35. Henry Hollingworth. I sent a super chat to your Monero address. Do you have any thoughts about how widespread using the Lord's name in
All right. Let me try to find that. Where is it?
It's underneath Seawalk 35. Which
Seawalk,
is in bright blue.
Seawalk 35. We will find it. Just give me a moment. Anyway, Sean, thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciated. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so Seawalk 35.
It was the camel leopard, last new covenant question. Seawalk 35. How did Balaam rap? The New Testament.
Wait a minute.
And then
Let me try to find the reference point here. Okay, so you start with the camel leopard. Is that the last new covenant question?
yes.
Okay.
Go down to the next one.
Okay.
Seawalk 35.
I see Swift Sea. Change. Henry Hollingworth. Swift Sea.
Yeah. Henry Hollingworth. It's not a it's
No. Okay. It's Henry Hollingworth's?
Yes.
Okay. Found it. Okay. Henry Hollingworth said, send a super chat to your Monero address. Well, thank you very much. We really do encourage people to use cryptocurrencies. These are fantastic. Very much appreciate that. I don't know amount because I don't have my wallet up at the moment, but very much appreciate the super chat, and we will honor it, definitely. And he asks, do you have any thoughts about how widespread using the Lord's name in vain has become in common language and media? I find it very disturbing. Okay. We have to understand what the Lord's name using the Lord's name in vain means. Okay? It isn't just using the Lord's name as, say, a cuss word. Okay, or an expletive. It isn't just that. In fact, that's sort of the minor offense here. Okay. Let me explain what the second commandment actually, the commandment against taking the Lord's name in vain actually means. It means taking it on lightly. What does that mean? Okay. Let's say you start a McDonald's franchise. You know, I sell you a McDonald's franchise, and I basically say, okay, here's a franchise. You know, represent my name very, very well. When you make your burgers, make the finest burgers possible. When you make your fries, make them the finest fries possible. But instead, what you do is you basically say, well, I don't have to keep this place all that clean. You let the toilets go to pot. You got garbage overflowing the bins. There's cockroaches running around. Rats are on the counter. Customers are getting sick. You throw dirt on the burgers because you hate the customers. As a person who bought my franchise, you are not representing my name well. That's what's sort of happening here with the commandment when someone takes the Lord's name in vain. They're saying, I am a follower of the Lord, but yet I am behaving in a way that is not flattering to the Lord. So that's what it really, really means. That's the major case here. Now, using the Lord's name as an expletive is that's, as I said, that's the minor portion of that. That's the minor meaning here. The major meaning is that if we follow the Lord, there's serious consequences to this. If our personal lives do not live up to the highest expectations of our God, we are taking the Lord's name in vain. It's a humbling and it's an awesome responsibility. But that is what's being meant here, is that, it's better that you don't follow God than to follow God falsely. That's sobering. That's really, really sobering. We really should be very, very cautious about, most people go, hey, pray the Lord's Prayer and you're done. And then they go off, they're not discipled, and they live lives of complete ruin, and they go, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I'm, cheating on my taxes, going out, getting drunk in public, carousing with prostitutes. I'm doing all those things, but I'm a Christian, saved by the blood. No, that's a violation of taking the Lord thy God's name in vain. You're not living the life that your orthopraxis is not matching what you say you believe. You're not representing the brand well. To use a corporate slang here, every company has a brand, a image it wants to keep up. And when its franchises do not keep up the brand, corporate headquarters gets upset. Same thing. The Lord has a brand, which is holiness, righteousness, purity, goodness, justice, mercy, grace, forgiveness. These are the highest ideals of worshiping Yahweh, worshiping the Lord. We don't live up to those highest ideals. That is taking the Lord thy God's name in vain. There's also the fact, too, that in the immediate context of that commandment, it is also manipulating God by... It was thought in Egyptian thought that you could manipulate God by using his true name. Essentially, a kind of magic. Okay? If you knew God's name, you could manipulate him to do what you want him to do. So there's also an aspect of this that's a prohibition to magic. I.e., pray to God to give you what you want, because you know his name. You can make deals with God to give you what you want. Okay? So there's this also extends to the fact that you cannot manipulate God. He is holy. And he's sovereign. So anyway, I hope that answers your super chat. Thank you very, very much for using Monero. Very much appreciated. That really does help us. And as I say, I really do encourage people to use cryptocurrency when donating, because it is, and actually it helps us grow because it's something that we can actually also use to make passive income as well. So that just helps us as well. So you get almost a bigger bang for the buck if you do. Like, for example, YouTube will take a 30% cut of all super chats, whereas with Monero, we get 100%, plus it helps us to earn passive income too. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very, very much appreciated, and I hope that answered your question. Okay, and we got a few more super chats here. And I want to thank my producer here for catching that. Okay, and I think, let's see here. Okay, I have another super chat here from Sean Horton for $10. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. He says, I recall you saying you've seen things in your response to atheists putting you on their list of most likely to become an atheist. Go on. Unlike a literary work, my questions have no common theme. Well, how do I say this? I have had some paranormal encounters. Okay. I have had some encounters with spirits. And some of these have been of a more demonic nature. So, yeah, I very much believe that these are real phenomena with real intelligences that have a real malevolent purpose. So, yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of crazy things, and you know, the longer I live, the more I seem to be seeing them. Just because, and no, I've never used drugs. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not boozing it up and going in a dark alley and seeing ghosts. You know, it's nothing like that. It's just, you know, you do, if you are sensitive enough to this, you do encounter these things. Especially if you start engaging the forces of darkness on an almost personal level, you start seeing this stuff. I have seen objects. Yeah, when you start doing this stuff on a theoretical level, it starts becoming very practical very quickly. You know, I've seen objects fly across the room. You know, I've seen some you know, stuff that people would think was absolutely nuts. You know, but yeah, I've had some encounters. So I do think yeah, it would be very, very difficult for me at this point to become an atheist. Very difficult for me to become an atheist, especially having seen some of the stuff I've seen. So anyway, that's all I'm going to elaborate on this at the moment. Thank you very much for the super chat. I very, very much appreciate it. Okay. $25 super chat from Prison Mike. Thank you very much for the super chat. Is it erroneous to criticize there being no evidence for Israelites in Egypt when, as I understand, Israel started with King Saul? I don't think it started with King Saul. I think it definitely started with Israelites in the Sinai. Now, it is erroneous to criticize there being no evidence of Israelites in Egypt. That is true. That is erroneous, because the Bible doesn't actually make the claim that they are Israelites living in Egypt. They just call them the sons of Jacob, or the sons of Israel. Okay? They don't actually become Israelites yet. It's not until they come into the Sinai and the mixed multitude becomes grafted into the 12 tribes that we start seeing Israelites proper. There is evidence of Israelites as an ethnonym as early as roughly 1217 BC. So this would be the time of the Israelite conquest. So not the kingdom period of King Saul, but earlier, much, much earlier. The Egyptians called them Israelites during the reign of King Merneptah. So we definitely have evidence of Israelites going by the name of Israelites 40 years later after the Exodus, at least when the Exodus should have taken place. So Israel starting with King Saul, that's too late. We already have evidence of their existence long before then, hundreds of years before then, at least roughly 200 years before that time. We have evidence of Israelites proper. So yes, it's erroneous, but not quite in that extent. So we don't see Israelites in Egypt. They're at that point just called what the Egyptians would call Asiatics. They're Levantine Semites, and a mixed multitude of various tribal and ethnic groups that inhabited the city of Avaris. And then when they leave Egypt, when they start wandering in the Sinai, they become Israelites at that point. So that's the point where they become Israelites. In that sort of 40 years between, say, 45 years between, say, the Exodus and the Libyan victory stela of Merneptah. So anyway, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. I hope that answered your question. Very, very good question. Okay. Another super chat from Cole Walker for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Could you talk a bit again about Jonah, Sheol, and Christ? This question is for my mom. Hi, Mom. Hello, Mom. Thank you very much for the super chat. Yeah, absolutely. When we look at, say, Jonah chapter 2, it's very clear from the text, and we'll bring it up again because I actually really like this text. This is a great text. It's actually one of my favorite recently rediscovered texts. There's some texts where you read it 100 times, when you're growing up, or in devotionally, and you then rediscover it again with new eyes. And once you start rediscovering it with new eyes, you can just go, oh wow, this text is so neat. This text is just really an outstanding text. And I think Jonah chapter 2 is one of the great, great texts. So we have here in Jonah chapter 2, verse 1, then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from the stomach of the fish. And he said, I called out in my distress to the Lord. And he answered me, I called for help from the depth of Sheol. Thou didst hear my voice. So he starts off with his prayer as he's being swallowed by the fish. But he ends his prayer from the depth of Sheol. And Sheol is the grave. It's the underworld. It's essentially the place where dead people go. And he continues on in verse 3. For thou didst cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the current engulfed me, all thy breakers and billows passed over me. So I said, I have been expelled from thy sight, which is, he's encountering that separation here between the land of the living, and God. So, nevertheless, I will look again toward the high holy temple. Then it goes on. Water encompassed me to the point of death. Okay? Now, the point of death here is actually not in, the point of is not in the text. Encompassed me to death. He's dead. He's dead. It goes on. The great deep engulfed me. Weeds were wrapped about my head. I descended to the roots of the mountains. Now, this is the idea that he's descending to the underworld. The roots of the mountain isn't the seas. The roots of the mountains are basically beneath the land. That idea that the underneath the land is waters, and within the waters is the grave shale. The earth with its bars was around me forever, but thou hast brought my life from the pit, O Lord my God. So basically the idea is he's dead, and he's down in the pit, and he's a goner. He's a goner. Verse 7, while I was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to thee into thy holy temple. Those who regard vain idols forsake their faithfulness, but I will sacrifice to thee with voice of thanksgiving. That which I vowed I will pay. Salvation is from the Lord. Then the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited up Jonah onto dry land. So essentially what we have all through Jonah chapter 2 here is death language. The language of a dead person. You know, if he was alive, he wouldn't be in shale. He wouldn't be under the roots of the mountains. This is all this is language of a dead person. So what we have here is Jonah. He's dead, and this actually brings more poignancy to Christ and his resurrection, because he's saying when the Jews ask for a miracle. Ask for a miracle. Show me you're the Christ. Perform a miracle. And Christ says, you shall have no other miracle than the sign of Jonah. That sign of Jonah is Jonah's dead. He's dead for 3 days. People go, I hate David C. Cook. David C. Cook is this producer of Sunday school materials, and they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. They present a really unrealistic image of the biblical texts to kids who later on take that image. It's very true. The first image we get sticks with us. It does stick with us. And I still remember this illustration by David C. Cook of Jonah sitting in the belly of a whale on a chair with a table and a light and basically an oil lamp. It's a fully furnished whale stomach. I still remember this. 50 years later, I still remember this. It's just like, no. People sometimes ask, well, how did Jonah, survive in the belly of a fish without oxygen? He didn't. It's that simple. He didn't. There was no oxygen in the belly of the fish. He would have asphyxiated. There's no air there. And he didn't survive. That's the point. That's the entire point here of Jonah chapter 2 is Jonah didn't make it. But he's brought back to life for this purpose. And this is what makes the sign of Jonah for Christ so poignant. Is Jonah was dead as a door knocker. Jesus Christ was dead as a door knocker. Jonah was raised from the dead by God. Christ was raised by the dead, from the dead by God. Perfect parallels. And that was what was meant. And I think when we try to make the case that Jonah wasn't dead, we diminish the significance of the passage. We diminish what it means for the resurrection of Christ. So, I hope your mother enjoyed that. I hope that helped explain it. And thank you again for that super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay. Angel WVM for $5. Thank you very much for the super chat. Do you think the height of Goliath is a literal 6 cubits and a span? Yeah, sure. I don't have any problem with this being a literal 6 cubits. That is 9 feet, and we do have, say, Egyptian satire text. There's a version of the Satire of the Trades that talks about Shasu being 6 cubits. So, I don't have a huge problem with this being 6 cubits.
Right now we have people.
Yeah, we do have some NBA players that are good 8 feet, so it's not that far off. So, I think it'd be nice if we found a few skeletons that showed Philistines of this height or Canaanites of this height. And we haven't found those yet, but we might. I don't think it was a common occurrence. I don't think it was that often that I think it was only some very rare individuals that might have had that height. But there are people groups that tend to be taller than others, and there are specific individuals that can be a lot taller or a lot shorter than what's normal for a human being. There's great diversity within the human genome. Tremendous diversity. So,
But it's impractical.
yeah, there's that aspect. My wife here points out that it is very impractical to be that tall. But then again, too, for example, the height, Goliath's height, was as much to be intimidating. He was to be intimidating. He was as much a weapon of intimidation as he was a actual practical fighter. So there is that as well. So yeah, I don't have it. I honestly don't have a problem with Goliath being a literal six cubits. That doesn't bother me that much. As I said, we have other texts that do say at least allude to the idea that people were that tall. So anyway. Thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciated. Okay, are we close to it? Awesome. All right. We are at the end of the super chats, and I'm going to take a few non-super chats here. Hopefully, we might even be able to call this one a little early tonight, because I'm hungry. So. Let's see here. So let's go look for let's see here. I'll take this one from Wolfgang Allen Alhazard. Any updates regarding amulet? Nothing really. Goliath has published something new. I've been told it's not very good. That's probably I haven't actually read it yet, but I was alerted to it by my source. So despite Goliath's misgivings, he's doubling down on this. So I need to go and look into this and see what he said about this. But there's nothing. The photos still have not been. The tomographic scans have still not been published. We still don't have any RTI images. The latest images that I have of the amulet are not compelling. They're not compelling. So there are, as far as I can tell, when I look at the epigraphy, I see only two letters on the tablet that are clear, an aleph and a resh, and they're very clear. They're very clear. So it's likely that it is a cursed tablet, and it's likely that it's a cursed tablet not so much based on the word curse, which is a rar, but lead tablets are often cursed tablets. So that would make sense anyway. But there hasn't been any more updates. And I don't expect there are going to be a lot of updates. I don't even know if they'll ever even release the scans, honestly. There's been a disturbing trend recently, say amongst more evangelical archaeological excavations, to not release raw data. Just because it's been, and this is a trend that was really started by Steve Collins with his excavations at Tel El Haman, where they won't release their raw data to anyone who doesn't agree to their readings to begin with. Well, how are you supposed to agree to their readings if you don't have access to the raw data? Well, you got to agree to it if you want the raw data. It's terribly duplicitous. But I'm wondering if we're going to see the same thing happen here. I hope not. I hope he does release the scans. I hope he does release the RTI images. And what we are going to do is we are going to one of the videos I want to do is I want to do a video on not another video on the amulet because there's nothing new coming out, but a video on, say, modern tools of epigraphy, because I think once people start seeing what tools are available to modern epigraphers, you can see how things in the game has really changed in, say, just the last 10 years. Not so much that the methods of reading have changed a lot, but more difficult texts have become easier to read because of new technologies. And I think it's really interesting. It's a really exciting time to be an epigrapher, because there's just tools that are available to you that you just couldn't believe before. And so we're going to be doing a video in hopefully the next few weeks on the tools of modern epigraphy. So anyway, thank you for the questions. Great question. Very interesting. Okay, we have another super chat, a very generous one. Prison Mike for $100. Thank you very much for that very, very generous super chat. Very much appreciated. Again, these super chats really, really help us make ends meet and help us to advance what we do. So I very much appreciate the generosity here. And he says, thank you for everything you do. I learned so much from you. Would Dr. Manfred Bitok agree that Israelites were Advaris until Ramses' dynasty? Actually, he would. If he doesn't believe that himself, would agree that it's possible? Yeah, actually, he does buy it now. Now, Bitok has changed his mind over the years. So he... So it very much sort of what view you get of him from him depends on where you catch him in his career. Now he has been doing the excavations at Avaris for 40 years. He led the dig there. He's the preeminent expert of Avaris, and he early on, when the digs were just getting started, he held to what's it called, a memorial view of the Exodus. He essentially thought that the Israelites were basically reenacting the view that the Hyksos left Egypt And the Israelites remember the Hyksos Exodus, and they were just, recapitulating that the Israelites never really were there, but the Hyksos were, and that. Well, then he goes on and he starts to discover that, the Semitic Asiatics were in Avaris for a long time, right into the Ramesside period. So, then he goes on and he goes, okay, well, maybe it's a late Exodus. So about 10, 15-ish years ago, he starts to change his view. So oh, well, it's got to be Dynasty 20, a late Exodus, a really late Exodus, Dynasty 20, Exodus view. And, Semites didn't obviously stay at Avaris. They left, they went somewhere. So, that's what it must be. Well, you fast forward this, to, another 5-10 years. And then he recognizes, well, in the reign of Ramses II, we start seeing the civilian buildings here replace, where we have a context of, say, consumer goods, basically like pots, eating utensils, that sort of thing. Squirrely girl. We've got a little bunny here who's being a little rambunctious at the moment. She's eating my books. For those of you who don't know, I have a pet rabbit, and she does tend to get into things. She's very, very cute. She's adorable, but she can be very naughty sometimes. Okay, so back to B-Talk. Okay, so he discovers that, during the mid-Dynasty 19, Avaris undergoes this transition from essentially being, an occupied town to being a cemetery. They start finding grave goods that date to Ramesses II. Well, so he then revises it again to say, okay, well, yeah, then it's almost certainly the late Exodus view, where it's definitely Ramesside dynasty, and it's definitely mid-Dynasty 19, which would be the reign of Ramses II. So yeah, he's come down. It's taken him a long time to get there. It's taken him a long time because he's not approaching it. He's not approaching it from biblical texts. He's approaching this almost entirely from an archaeological perspective. So he's got there. He's got there, but it just took him a very, very long time to sort of, navigate through all the data to get there. So, today he would agree with that. 15 years ago, he probably wouldn't have. Definitely 40 years ago, he didn't. So, yeah, today he does. So, anyway, I hope that answers your question. Thank you very much for that very, very generous super chat. Again, these super chats are really, really helpful to keep us funded and going, and we so very much appreciate it. So thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoy the ministry. I'm glad you're learning a lot, and we strive to produce lots and lots of new content so that everyone gets to learn, everyone gets to share in the wealth, and everyone gets to experience intellectual engagement and growth. So thank you so much for that super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, so let's take another non-super chat. Faye of the Duat, $2. Must see Bunny.
Is that a getter?
She would really dislike it, but huh?
Yeah.
Must see Bunny, huh? Oh, she took off. She knew that was coming. If she had been close by, I would have picked her up and you would have seen her. But
Mr. Rich B.O.B., one does not simply pick up a bunny. At least in my experience. Rabbits are very aggressive and scratchy.
well, she's not aggressive. She's not aggressive. She used to be. We picked her up as a rescue. She was a rescue. So we adopted her from the local rabbit rescue, and she's. It's taken a long time to actually socialize her to the point where she's become a very, very sweet bunny. She's become very, very sweet. So, but maybe I can. Let's see if I can come up with a picture at least. Let's see here. I think I might have a picture. Just a moment. Do I have a picture is a question that I can easily get at. Yeah. Okay, let's see here. Give you an image here. The image. Okay. 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 All right. This will just take a moment here to size this down. All right. Oops. And it'll start there. There you go. There's a picture of our little bunny. Yes, that's our little sweetie. Her name is Merneith. She is actually named after an Egyptian queen of the second dynasty. So there is actually a. It means her. The name means beloved of Neith. Interestingly enough, we do have there's a monument of Merneith that is actually in the Egyptian Museum, probably now the gem now, but yeah, we named her after an Egyptian queen because she was so royal. So that's our little bunny, who's actually right now being a little bit of a rascal, but yeah, there she is. So thank you very much for that super chat. Very much appreciate it. Okay, so and you got to see a bunny. Okay, so let's go on to a few more non-super chats, and then we'll probably call it a night. Let's see here, because we've already gone past 2 hours. We're on 2 hours and 40 minutes here, but I always want to get a few, at least as many non-super chats as is practical. So let's see what else we got. Hmm.
Easter's
No, let's actually talk about that actually, because that's actually who said that?
uh, me, we have Juat in it.
Okay. Is that let's see, Mahania. Easter is Ashtar, Ishtar, Isis. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's pretty much been debunked. Easter is essentially the holiday of it's a new moon festival, but it's essentially it's a calculation of a festival. Now, very, I mean, this is something that sort of keeps getting dredged up, but it really isn't. In the Old or in the New Testament, where you see the Bible put in Easter, it is actually Passover or Pesach. Okay, so even in the New Testament documents, it's Pesach. It's the Passover. Okay, but even if it was say Easter proper, Easter is not derived from Ishtar or Ashtar. It's definitely not Isis, because Isis is Iset. It's Iset. So what we have here is a false what we call a false etymology, where you have a word that looks similar to other words, and you draw the false conclusion that they are related. Okay, so it's definitely not related to Ishtar or Asher or Isis in any way. Now, the idea is that that Easter here is it's a new moon. It's a moon fest. It's a lunar festival that's based upon harvest. It's based upon harvest, and it's a very complex calculation. It's a very complex calculation, and I don't remember all the details that go into the calculation of Easter, but it's roughly based upon a certain count of weeks after something like the third new moon or something like that. It's a very, very complicated calculation. It was only in the third or fourth century A.D. that Christian patriarchs started to create lunar tables. They started to create lunar tables to figure out how to calculate Easter. So I mean, this goes into the whole sort of the dating process of how Easter was calculated. As I said, it's a very complex calculation. It is based upon lunar cycles. It is definitely based upon lunar cycles. It's there's just no way out of that. So yeah, well, yeah, you're free to have your opinion on that, but that's pretty much what the history of Easter is. It's basically it's basically a first fruit celebration. It's a first fruit celebration. It's a first fruit celebration, and it's based upon lunar tables. So that's more or less it. But it is not related to Ishtar, and it's not related to Asher, and it's not related to Isis. Not in any way. So anyway, see Sifley's question. What are your thoughts on James Kugel's How to Read the Bible Is it worth it? I don't know. I haven't read it. I've heard.
No.
Well, look. I mean, it might be worth it. I mean, I've heard some good things about it. I just don't know enough about it. So I don't like recommending a book where I haven't read it myself. So okay, now this question I can answer. Thought on Dr. Titus Kennedy. I don't recommend Titus Kennedy. He plays fast and loose with the evidence. He's basically one of the people associated with Associates for Biblical Research. He does have that early Exodus axe to grind. He'll often take things out of their historical context to try to provide archaeological proofs for a specific point of view. His materials are deeply unreliable. Deeply unreliable. He's pretty much considered to be a joke in the field. He's a joke in the field. He's just another one of those. He was a consultant on patterns of evidence. And boy, yeah, that gets pretty bad. That gets pretty bad. So, and Ivan Uribe says, okay, I've been seeing him on recent YouTube video interviews. Yeah, he interviews a lot on YouTube. But he's not reliable. He doesn't produce good materials. So I would not recommend him. Don't know if it's worth reposting my question from earlier in the live stream. Which question's that? So I'm not sure what question that is.
You can repost it.
You can repost it. I'll yeah, go ahead and repost it. We'll see if I want to answer it or not. I might not want to answer it.
Marnie's here, by the way.
Let's leave it be. Okay. Louis Sandoval asks, what are the identity of the nations separated at the Tower of Babel, for instance, if they were Elamites, Akkadians, etc.? They were people who were living in Mesopotamia. We don't know exactly what their identity was. Some have attributed it to the Eridu expansion. I think that the Eridu expansion is a flawed hypothesis. I think the Eridu expansion happens actually much later than what we would probably attribute Babel to be, because we find, for example, Nagata civilizations in the Nile Valley long before the Eridu expansion. So I don't think that's a good explanation for it. But it's almost impossible to try to identify what those nations would have been at Babel, just because it's so long before written history. We don't have anything to sort of track it down and sort of pinpoint there. It's really too early. It's really too early for us to really sort of get a grasp upon what that material culture would have been like. So would be very, very difficult to make an evaluation of that cultural context. Okay, let's see here. Harry Stark asks, is it irrational for lay people to disregard miracles a priori? Well, it would sort of be irrational to discount anything a priori. It would be more rational to discount things a posteriori. If you've got evidence, then you might be able to discount certain things. But here's where I kind of sit with the whole thing on miracles. I believe in miracles. Okay, I think miracles are possible. I think we live in an open universe. We live in a universe that has, say, the Casimir effect, where particles warp in and out of existence. You don't get that in a closed universe. You just don't get that in a closed universe. Things just don't warp in and out of existence in a closed universe. So we're dealing here with an open universe. With that said, then things can happen, and then things cannot happen. There is the idea that there could be miracles. Are they normal? No. Are they normative? No. If they were normative, they wouldn't be a miracle. They'd be just part of nature. So to disregard them entirely is irrational. Okay? But I've also seen the flip side of this too. That people have often ascribed miracles where the Bible doesn't claim miracles. And I think that's also very damaging. Like for example, when people try to contend for a Red Sea crossing across the Gulf of Aqaba, they have to resort to miracle upon miracle upon miracle to get that to work. Like, they have to resort to the fact that you have a wind set down there that's 3,000 kilometers an hour. Well, how does that not tear everyone apart? Well, that's a miracle too. Well, how do they manage to see at the 2,300 feet below sea level, in pitch blackness? Well, that was a miracle also. How did the winds prevent, blowing away Pharaoh's army? Well, that's a miracle as well. So once you start having compound miracles, there's some issues here. How did they make it across? Mountain climb down, mountain climb up in less than a night. That's a miracle also. So I do think that there's some real issues here with going overboard on miracles as well. I mean, again, this is something where we have to just take the Bible on its own merits. Did Christ was Christ walking on the water a miracle? Yeah, absolutely. That was a miracle. Walking on water, there's no other way to do that other than a miracle. I mean, it's just, unless you're strapping huge pontoons on your feet, and I think everyone would see that. You don't take a gradual stroll on a stormy ocean. It's just that ain't happening. So, unless it is a miracle. So, yeah, I do believe in miracles, but I only believe them insofar as the Bible insists they are miracles. Not everything that happens in the Bible that seems extraordinary is necessarily a miracle of the first order. That doesn't preclude God from using natural means to do his will also. So, yeah, there's always that too. Then you have to say, well, if it is a hypernatural event as opposed to a supernatural event, is the timing itself a miracle? So anyway, that's where I stand on the whole thing about miracles. So, anyway, great question. Thank you for asking it.
Did you see his MFM? He was curious from last live stream how someone would construct a good case.
Okay, that's the question you want. I posted a question about how I was curious from the last live stream how someone would construct a good case for young earth creationism. Okay, here's the catch. You have to abandon the hermeneutic. You see, here's the thing. Young earth creationism is not exactly tied to the Bible. The problem is, you can make a defensible case for young earth creationism, but you have to do it almost entirely on scientific merit, while at the same time abandoning the crummy hermeneutic that is often tied to American young earth creationism. Okay? So it's possible to do, say, an idealized, say, case of young earth creationism, but you can't do it using the Bible as evidence. Once you start using the Bible as, say, your caseload, is your case evidence for young earth creationism, the hermeneutic weight of that sort of works against you. So, in a sense, what you're doing here is you're basically saying that the Bible doesn't show that the earth is young, but we believe it is young. So because you're not using the Bible as evidence that the earth is young, and you're not using the genealogies in that way, you're not going to get the conflicting evidence of, say, conventional chronology. Like, for example, one of the problems with the way that young earth creationists could reconstruct history from the Bible, their young earth case, is they're basing backdating the genealogies to say, oh, well, the flood happened sometime around 2300 BC. Okay, well, that's after the pyramids. That's going to be a huge problem. That's going to be a massive, massive problem if you're trying to make a case for a young earth creation. But if you make a case for young earth creation by just saying, well, we're not going to use the Bible to do any dating, you can make that defensible. That is entirely defensible. You're going to have to do the heavy lifting of saying, countering Darwinism, and you'll have to do that entirely on a scientific level, and that's going to be difficult, but it's also not impossible. But you have to abandon the hermeneutic that a lot of people use to become young earth creationists in order to defend young earth creationism. Now the details, I'll leave to you, but that's how it would be done. If you were to make a defensible case for young earth creationism, that's how you'd have to do it. Is essentially make it so that you can't use the Bible to backdate. So if you abandon the hermeneutic, then you're treating the Bible like other views of, say, origins, like old earth creationism or progressive creation or other sorts of creation. So that's how you'd make a defensible case. So anyway, thank you very much for the question. Interesting question. Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a record.
Wow, that is a record. Wow. Thank you for that super chat. Wow, you've been so generous to us tonight. Thank you so much. That is the largest super chat we've ever got, a single super chat we've ever gotten. Wow, amazing. Thank you so very much. $200 is an outstandingly generous super chat. We very, very much appreciate that. Wow. I'm really floored by your generosity. Thank you so much. Okay, and you write, there's a popular notion that Egyptians wrote everything down. The general population sees hieroglyphs adorn most pieces of Egyptian architecture, and we assume that the entire chronological history of Egypt is written in stone, and that we have all of it. How misguided is this thought? It's incredibly misguided, unfortunately. You get guys like Michael Shermer who say that, we have a complete record of ancient Egypt. And, well, we don't find the Exodus in there. Therefore, there was no Exodus. So, that just shows that he does not understand Egyptian archaeology, the records of ancient Egypt. The records of ancient Egypt are actually very fragmentary. They're very, very fragmentary. Now, we do have a lot of writing from Egypt. Unfortunately, almost all of it is religious writing. It's almost all religious texts. They're funerary texts, and those are religious texts, or they're temple texts, those are religious texts. They're almost all religious texts. We have only a very, very few administrative texts or diplomatic texts. We have almost no court records from ancient Egypt. We only have the letters from one 15-year period, and we only have those records coming into Egypt, not going out. So our insight into how the Egyptian court worked, what actually happened in Egypt on a day-to-day basis, is very obscured. It's very obscured. And it doesn't. It also doesn't help that almost all the records we have are in the south of Egypt, which is where, say, the more religious institutions were. So, like the administrative capital of Egypt throughout its history was at Memphis. You go to Memphis today, you stand a good chance of water soaking in your shoes. You stand on the sand and water just seeps into your shoes. You see little depressions in the sand where there's like a mud puddle. Well, that's going to destroy anything that was made of papyrus. Water and papyrus don't mix. The salt water of the Nile Delta, the groundwater in the Nile Delta is so high in salt that it actually penetrates stone. And when you lift the stone out of the sand, out of the silt, that stone, as soon as it starts drying out, starts to crumble before your eyes. It's really phenomenal. What happens is that water evaporates, the salt forms crystals, and basically these stone inscriptions will completely fall apart. We actually see that. We also see that in, say, for example, at the Temple of Mut, where many of the inscriptions were underneath the water table, and many of those inscriptions didn't survive either. So, yeah, we don't have a complete written record from Egypt, and I wish we did. It'd make things a lot easier. The chronological record is itself is we have places where it's really good, and we have places where it's really spotty and not very good at all. During dynasties 18, especially late dynasty 18, early dynasty 19, it's very good. It's very good and it's very accurate. Probably down to only just plus or minus 5 years. So that particular area is really, really good. We got a lot of corroborating evidence for those reigns. We got a lot of synchronisms. It's really excellent at that point in time. Middle Kingdom, not so good. We only have like one synchronism for the entire Middle Kingdom, and that happens to be with the reign of Neferhotep the First. We have a synchronism between him and the king of Mari and Hammurabi. So that's a really interesting time for there to be a synchronism, but there is one there. The Egyptian Old Kingdom is probably a lot further off by probably plus or minus 50 years as much. So, and in the case of, say, the Third Dynasty 13, we're not sure what the order of the kings were. And part of the problem with that particular dynasty is that you had a lot of short reign kings, like 20, 30 kings that ruled for less than 10 years. So Dynasty 13 is really, really hard to piece together. I think there's been some good efforts made. I know Thomas Schneider has worked on this. I also know that, what was his name now? I think it was Janssen who worked on that as well. There are people who are doing work, a lot of good chronological work, but these darker areas. The early Second Intermediate period is the same way. Early Dynasty 15. We've got some idea of the Hyksos kings, but we're not exactly sure how long they reigned, exactly who was in charge at the time. So, there's things we still have to learn. And this is one of the things that's actually exciting about Egyptian archaeology, is there's always something new to learn. However, it is very, very misguided to say that we have a complete record or a complete history of Egypt. We just don't. We just don't. We're not even close to that. We are not even close to a complete record. We're better off than, say, for example, say the history of a lot of Levant. It's better for Egypt than, say, for the Hittite Empire. Like, for example, the early Hittite Empire, we have almost no idea who was in charge. No idea. Well, like, we've got Mercili the First, and I think that's about it. So, we know, in the case of the Hittites, we know there was a Hittite Old Kingdom. We just don't know who ran it. So we're actually doing a lot better with Egypt than we are doing with other, say, civilizations of the ancient Near East. But it's by no means complete. Not even close. So, anyway, I want to thank you very much for that extremely generous super chat. You've been very generous to us tonight. We very much appreciate it, and thank you so very much. Okay, I am going to take one or...
Thomas said, "Were you educated, Lord? Who were your influence?" Want to tell her how you know how?
Ooh, what?
Near the end.
Near the
Were
end.
you educated under Alan Millard at the University of Liverpool?
Who said that?
Courtney Thompson.
Okay. Okay. Courtney Thompson writes, "Were you educated under Alan Millard while at the University of Liverpool? Who are your most influential scholars during your education?" Okay. Okay. No, I was not educated under Alan Millard while I was at the University of Liverpool. He had already retired by the time I was at Liverpool. I was actually educated. My two doctoral supervisors were Steve Collier, or sorry, Mark Collier, and Stephen Snape. Mark Collier and Stephen Snape. So those were my doctoral supervisors while at Liverpool. But I was research assistant under Kenneth Kitchen. Okay, so basically I worked my way. I got a stipend. I got a scholarship, but the terms of that scholarship was that I had to be the research assistant for Kenneth Kitchen. And Kenneth Kitchen was who was actually the greatest influence upon me when I was at Liverpool, because man, the guy knows so much. The guy just it was like living and breathing with someone who lived with the pharaohs himself. It just was crazy how much the guy was, and he was very versatile. He's very, very versatile. He isn't, say, the easiest scholar to get along with. He's very opinionated, extremely opinionated. But he had, he was not only a brilliant Egyptologist, which is its own skill. He was a good historian, good Egyptian historian, but he was also an excellent epigrapher. He was an excellent epigrapher. So I got to see how he did epigraphy, and I learned essentially just by being in the same room with him how to do epigraphy, because I saw how he did it. He was also very, very good at old Arabic inscriptions as well. So he would often call himself, he didn't as much call himself, he didn't always call himself an Egyptologist. He often called himself an Orientalist. He called himself an Orientalist. And the term Orientalist has sort of nowadays, it has colonial connotations. It's not something people generally call themselves. But an Orientalist was the idea of a scholar that was adept at many different aspects of the ancient Near East. So, and this definitely described Kitchen. You know, he was adept at many different disciplines within the sort of the scope of the ancient Near East. So it wasn't just, he wasn't just an Egyptologist. He could read Hebrew, he could read Hittite, he could read Akkadian, he could read Greek, he could read Latin. He was good at as I said, at epigraphy. He would translate Hittite hieroglyphs for fun. This was his idea of a Sabbath rest, of Sunday rest. Was he stopped doing Egyptian hieroglyphs to work on Hittite hieroglyphs. That was his idea of a good time. That was his idea of fun. So, in many respects, Kitchen is the last great Orientalist. You know, the last guy who could be that sort of adept all across the board. And sort of the same way that say William Albright was. Now, I've tried my education to be very, very similar to that model, where my particular degrees are sort of have a very, very broad base. You know, and I did a lot of this in my master's level work, where I, would do, say, yes, I did Akkadian, I did Ugaritic, I did all these other things during my master's program, the Hebrew, the Greek, and all that, which is why I have, a Master of Divinity, I have a Master of Biblical Archaeology, and then I have a Master's in Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations, to have that really, really broad base of graduate level education, so that, I could be more adept and more versatile when I come to it. But yeah, absolutely. My greatest influence at Liverpool was Kitchen, but I got Alan Millard also, because Alan Millard was Kitchen's best friend. So I became good friends with Alan Millard in the process. So, and we're still good friends. So he wasn't my teacher, but I did become friends with Alan Millard, and would socialize with him frequently. So yeah, I still remember going up to Millard's office once at Liverpool. Millard and Kitchen shared an office. Both of them were technically emeritus. So I went up to I had to meet Kitchen up in his office, and Millard happened to be there, and there was a time when Millard gave me a pile of books once. I'm like, cool, this is awesome. So yeah, he is a very good friend. Very, very much loved the man. Okay, so I'm going to take one last question, and then we are definitely calling it a night, because I'm still hungry, and there's a lamb and a Seder dinner waiting for me. So I'm going to take one more, and I'm going to call it a night. I think I'm going to just cut more to the beginning here. So let's see here. Okay, I'll take this last one. Conan Marshy, and this will be the last non-super chat for the night. And he asks, a while back you mentioned that there was a historical timeline developed by a computer program that you liked. What is it, and where do I find it? Thank you, sir. Okay, it's one I actually developed myself. So I developed the program. In a past life, I was a computer systems analyst and computer programmer. So I'm very, very good with technology. Very good with programming languages. Yeah, I know. And so I developed this. Basically, when I was a grad student under Kitchen, I noticed the way he did chronology. He's a good, brilliant chronologist as well. Was very almost mechanical, and I thought to myself, "Wow, I think that I could use a computer to simulate a lot of what Kenneth Kitchen does." So I did. I did this sort of proof of concept program where I could take a small chronology, just very, very simple, and I wrote it originally in Perl, which was what I was doing at the time. I was doing more Perl programming at the time. And I discovered, yeah, it did work. But I also discovered something very interesting too, is that it could be used to validate and to really sort of mechanically see if certain possibilities fit versus not. So this whole idea that you could actually use a computer to validate chronologies was something I discovered in this process of actually developing this program. We also discovered some very interesting effects that happen with chronology that nobody's never talked about, because up until that point, everybody was doing chronology by hand. Everyone. Now, the website is www.groundhogchronology.com. Okay, and granted, it does need more work. Chronology is one of these things that always needs more work. If I had more time, I'd be working on that as well to add more synchronisms, to tighten up some loose ends on the code. But it's right now has produced a chronology that's better than anything we have at the moment. So I'll leave you to look at that. Mr. P.O.P. Mr. HBOB, Ancient Egypt in the Bible. I don't like Perl. Perl is ugly. I want to learn Perl, but Perl is ugly. Thank God it will never be as ugly as Haskell. My nightmares are Haskell. Yeah, I don't actually recommend people do Perl anymore. Now, you have to kind of understand that when I was doing this, I had done it in my career. I had written over 500,000 lines of Perl code in my career, so at that time I was very, very adept at Perl. But it is ugly, and it's hard to debug, and that's probably the worst thing about Perl, is it's very difficult to debug. About 5 years ago, I started making the switch to Python, and I haven't looked back. Almost everything I do now is in Python. So, you do still do some little things that, like JavaScript as you need them. Like, for example, the front end of, say, the Groundhog Chronology Laboratory is done in JavaScript, but the back end is now all Python. So, yeah, I just like doing things in Python. It's just so much easier to debug. So, I agree with you. Perl is extremely ugly. You don't want to program in Perl. Okay. Yeah, but Python is the way to go. Python is definitely. Harry Stark says, I was taught Perl in bioinformatics, though it is getting replaced by Python, and good reason. Good reason. It has all the power of Perl, but it's easier to debug. 10 times easier to debug. So I highly recommend, if you're going to do a programming language, definitely go with Python. It's a great language. And it's got lots of libraries, well supported by most architectures. So, yeah, definitely the way to go. So anyway, that is the last question for the night. Wow, this was an incredible night. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Wow, the super chatters tonight were super generous. Thank you so very much for all the generosity you showed us tonight. What a great gift for Good Friday and Passover. We are so appreciative for all your generosity tonight. I also want to put in a plug here for our Patreon supporters. Thank you so very much for supporting us on Patreon. You guys are champions. We don't recognize you enough, and you do really help us, and we do very, very much appreciate all our Patreon supporters. And also, we want to thank our subscribers who watch our content and keep us in the algorithm. You guys also, when you leave a comment on our posts or on our videos, that helps the YouTube algorithm know that you guys like the content and promote it. So with that said, I want to thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Have a great Good Friday. Have a great Shabbat Shalom Pesach, and I will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Thank you very much, and have a great night.